5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, first of all, let me say Happy New Year. May your new year be prosperous, full of health and joy. And may your spiritual new year be on the same level as your material new year. And I hope you had a great Christmas. Mine was very good. It was nice and quiet and peaceful. Now, we're starting off a new year, and I think it's important for myself and all the rest of us out there who see ourselves as activists. It's important that we do our best in this coming year to make sure that people are aware of the momentous happenings that are taking place, not just in this city, but in this country. Now, for the Republican Party, their man of this coming year is Donald Trump. On our side, we have basically we have Hillary Clinton, and we have Senator Bernie Sanders. And as you know, Hillary was our former Secretary of State. And then, of course, we have Mr. O'Malley, former mayor of Baltimore, running now. And I kind of hesitate on Mr. O'Malley because, unfortunately for him, he is in a predicament where he feels that he has been totally cast aside. In all honesty, I have to say that there is some truth in what he says. Unfortunately, he decided to run in a year when the Democratic Party has one very well-known political person, Hillary Clinton, and also another who's rapidly becoming very well-known, Senator Bernie Sanders. And he has been in, my God, Bernie, as we like to call him, has been in the Congress for so long. 25 years, something like that? He was mayor. He was a mayor of a town up in Vermont. But he's originally from New York now. He's originally from, I forget, either the Bronx or Brooklyn. And then him and his family, they moved up to Vermont. He became a mayor up there. And then he decided to run for Congress as an independent socialist. And he's done quite well for himself. When I say quite well, I mean politically. He has been fighting for things like civil rights, fair income distribution of the wealth in this country, women's rights. These are not new subjects for Senator Bernie Sanders. He's been doing this for a long time. I can honestly say he's been out there fighting the fight from the time I was a young child. So he's been out there. As far as Hillary is concerned, she has, in her way, been fighting also for what we would call the right things. Again, women's rights, fairness in the marketplace, what have you. The problem with her is that she does carry a lot of baggage. Many people think that her biggest piece of baggage is her husband, which I think in that regard she might be, how should I say, she might have a lot in common with a lot of housewives, or I should say wives, that their husband is their baggage. But those of us who are old enough, I'm quite sure we're tired of the story, basically, of Monica Lewinsky, who was a young intern. As a young woman, her first job out of university was in the White House, where she essentially hooked up with President Bill Clinton. And unfortunately for the Clintons, an affair ensued. And it was embarrassing, both for, at the time, President Bill Clinton and for Hillary. And it was dealt with, and they managed to keep their family together. And I'm quite sure you're noticing that I'm getting ready to go on to a different subject, because I honestly believe that unless there's violence involved, or any kind of domestic abuse involved, if that's not involved, then how people decide to handle their marital situation, that's their business. We've had plenty of presidents that, how should I say, have made mistakes. And one of the greatest ones was Thomas Jefferson. People forget that the man that wrote the Declaration of Independence, the man who was our third president of the United States, the man who enabled America to grow to the West Coast by the Louisiana Purchase, this gentleman, what would you call it? Basically carried on an affair with a young black woman who also happened to be his slave, and he had many children by her, the descendants of which are living right there. Where is that? Charles County, Virginia, to this very day. Yet no one would denigrate the genius of the Declaration of Independence. It is a great document, but again, this was written by a man that was a slaveholder and that carried on an affair with a pre-adult young African-American woman. Now, does that make the Declaration of Independence any less powerful? I don't think so. So therefore, I'm not going to belabor the whole point about Bill Clinton and the young intern that he wound up having an affair with. That's their personal situation between him and Hillary, and that's it. I have nothing else to say about that. Now, I do have problems with Hillary in terms of her foreign policy. I think that she is, I'm not saying that she's a neocon, breaking it simply, that's somebody that believes that the United States should be ready to march into other people's country to basically set up a situation that we in America feel is proper. I mean, when you get down to it, bottom line, that's what being a neocon is all about. Now, we've had an example of their foreign policy with Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, you could say that Afghanistan was a justifiable war because apparently the perpetrators of 9/11 organized themselves in Afghanistan. In my opinion, that should have ended when we finally caught up with bin Laden, and according to what the government says, we managed to kill him. Well, that should have been done. And that whole situation should have been turned over to the United Nations. One of the problems when people complain about the United Nations being too weak is that, and I'm not just solely out to punish or put down the United States, but we are somewhat responsible for that weakness because the superpowers, i.e. America, the former Soviet Union, now Russia, and to a point China, we essentially use the United Nations as our plaything. And then we're surprised and we say, we'd love to turn things over to the UN, but aside from a concern about the UN being strong enough to intervene in a nation's internal affairs, we've also made it so weak that we can't depend upon it to use adequate force projection. For example, in Iraq, that is something that situation should have never happened. And if it were not for the neocons in the Bush White House, Bush Jr. White House, that situation would have never developed. The problem I have with Ms. Clinton is that she believes, to a point, not as bad as most neocons, but she's kind of up there. Prime example, Libya. She was the primary person pushing for the overthrow of Gaddafi. Now, this is the same Gaddafi that was starting to be not an ally, but starting to be, how should I say, someone that wanted to concentrate upon developing Africa. He was not interested in, if he ever was, in projecting himself throughout the so-called Middle East. He was turning more and more inwards. And if that's the time that she chose to get the guy overthrown and subsequently murdered. And I think that was a bad, I know that was a bad move, because now you've destabilized the country and you have made it an open store for militant groups like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS. And that's the danger when you make intervention a regular part of your foreign policy. And that things like that, that's the problem that I have with former Secretary of State Clinton. Now, there are some things that we should, as Americans, should all see as very disturbing. And that's why sometimes I sit out here with the paper on the Concerned Forum, and we'll together see just what's going on in our world and in our country. Today's the Daily News. Next time it might be the New York Times. But as we open the paper, we see that right now, jobs claim to be up, but the Dow Jones is still down. One thing I always found so ironic, so strange, why is it in America that when you have a time of good employment, somehow that's not good for the stock market? That doesn't that has never sat right with me. That's one of the points that Bernie Sanders talks about. The two, possibly three Americas. Why is it that the regular economy, the Main Street economy, that doesn't seem to register with the powers that be? But they have a supreme interest in Wall Street. So I'm trying to understand what will be better, that we have high unemployment but a great stock market? I don't get that. Now, one of the things in terms of justice in this country, we should all find quite disturbing. NYPD has basically busted this sergeant. Her name, they filed departmental charges against Sergeant Kizzy Adonis. Now, apparently, her problem or her crime was that she was, in the military, we would call it NCO, non-commissioned officer. She was the sergeant who wound up being there. She wasn't there at the start of when Mr. Gardner was murdered by this officer. You know, I'm quite sure all of you are familiar with the story, with the incident, I should say. A gentleman was literally strangled to death in front of other police, and I believe EMT was there also. And it revolved around selling loose cigarettes. So a man was strangled to death behind selling loosies, as we call them here in the city. And I find that troubling. Troubling because that seems to be just another in a series of incidents where police have killed people of color. Now, we had a very fortunate incident. I believe this occurred last night, and down the road a piece in Philadelphia. This gentleman, here we go, terror hits Philly. This gentleman, African American, for some reason, whatever reason in his mind, he runs up to a police vehicle, a squad car, and he begins shooting at the officer that's in the car, in the squad car. And amazingly, after all the rounds that this gentleman pumped into the officer was still able to get out of his squad car and return fire at the fleeing suspect. Now, of course, the suspect was unable to escape, but oddly enough, when he was caught, when he was apprehended, he said, now hold on a second, because I want to make sure that we're being factual here. He stated that he had pledged his allegiance to the Islamic State. He praised Allah, and he said that Allah had called upon him to be, with the Islamic State and perpetrate the action that he attempted to, he didn't attempt to perpetrate it. He attempted to kill the officer. Fortunately, that did not happen. But what should be disturbing, especially in times such as this, his statement opens up the door for a whole host of these, and I will come out and say it, right-wing nuts that routinely attack black people and Latino people that speak about racism. And they've always been quick to accuse people of color of not truly loving this country the way they do. Now, no better proof of this prevalent attitude can be found than just looking at the White House. Look at the present occupant of the White House. Look at how the first man of color, the first black president, look how he has been treated these last several years. It's a crime, it is a sin. The way that this man and his family, they've attacked his children, they've attacked his wife, they have attacked President Barack Obama in ways that I swear you have not seen a first lady attacked with such fervor since Abraham Lincoln. Honestly. If she says that you should drink water 8 times a day because it's good for you, Rush Limbaugh and the rest of the right-wing crowd will say that, well, she's trying to sponsor some kind of communist pot. You know, that's where the mentality has sank to. Look how the present leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump, and I call him the leader of the Republican Party because up until now, up until lately, the person that's running for the foremost office in the United States, that is considered to be the leader. That person is considered to be the leader of the party. That's simple. So right now, the leader of the Republican Party is Donald Trump. And if you remember, for the last several years, Mr. Trump has been the one attacking this president, talking about, oh, well, he really wasn't that smart to get into Columbia and Harvard and to be teaching the law and all this good stuff. Because, of course, in Mr. Trump's mind, that is just too high a level for a black man to operate on. And I think that that is pathetic. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, aren't you going to talk about how Donald Trump harassed President Obama behind his birth certificate, the whole birth certificate thing? Well, oddly enough, I'm trying to figure this guy out. Is he an equal opportunity ass? Hey, I'm Donald Trump. I'm an equal opportunity jerk. Because apparently he's doing something very similar to his competitor for the Republican primary. What's his name? Senator Cruz from Texas. Because he's attacking Cruz for being born in Canada and what have you. Are we going to see an alliance of the mainstream Republican leadership getting with Trump? Because, they hate Cruz just as much as they hate Trump. And I think the problem with them also is that they dislike Cruz maybe a little bit more than they dislike Trump. The reason being because Cruz is a brilliant guy. Okay, no. I mean, he has the same type of academic pedigree that the president has. And unfortunately for Cruz, he reminds too many people of the late Joe McCarthy, who actually gave his name to an era, the McCarthy era, McCarthyism, what have you. Not that they disagree with Cruz, but I think they find themselves fearful of the way that Cruz does the things that he, acts upon the things that he speaks about. Also, because Cruz, for all practical intents and purposes, has declared war on the leadership of his own party. So there's a whole cast of characters in the relationship between Cruz and the Republican Party. But getting back to the point, you see Trump using, strangely enough, very similar tactics on Cruz that he used on President Obama. Now, let's get something cleared up here. I am a supporter for Bernie Sanders. I have a great deal of respect for the President Obama. I was a volunteer twice on his campaign. However, I think that I would not be alone with most when I say that the president, to a certain extent, has been A, disappointing, and B, I see, how should I say, an unwillingness to confront some of the true enemies of the middle class. I do believe that in certain respects, in some respects, he's gotten smarter, let's say, and tough at the right places. But overall, no, I don't. I do have problems with some of the president's policies. And those of us who are progressives, Democrats, what have you, we have to understand that the way we get things done in this country is with politics, okay? This whole idea that, you know, if you support somebody, then you're supposed to support them 24 hours a day on every issue, I think that that's a mistake, okay? I lost my wife several years ago, God rest her soul. I truly loved her. But on some issues, there were times when I felt she was wrong. It's just that simple. Now, if I can disagree with my wife, the woman I love, then I most certainly can disagree with a politician. Because that's what they are. They are politicians. They are fallible human beings, just like we all are. So that's why I made the point that I make, that, yeah, I have the highest respect for the president, but I don't agree with him about everything. However, he is our president. And I think it was a shame. It's been shameful the way that this president has been treated by the opposition. And what angers me about that treatment is that when you try to pin one of these right-wing folks, pin them down, ask them, okay, well, hey, I can dig it. You don't like the president. Now, kindly tell me, what is it, what particular policy of his that you don't like, that you don't agree with, and have the goodness to explain why you don't particularly agree with it. And very, very rarely will you be able to find somebody from the right-wing Republican. Very seldom can they give you a specific answer to that question about what is it that they don't like. Now, in the beginning of his first term, someone, was it Limbaugh? Somebody from the right, okay, they tried to come out with this thing. Oh, well, so you're saying that if I think the president is wrong, then I'm a racist. If I don't agree with your guy Obama, then I'm a racist. Now, I write a lot to comment lines and what have you to try and improve my, writing and debating skills. And I would, in response, I would say, no, I'm not saying that because you disagree with the president on any particular subject, that doesn't make you a racist. No. But when you see these folks out there with the signs, like we saw during the healthcare debate, with the signs and the pictures of the voodoo witch doctor and all this kind of crap. Yeah, I think you might be leaning over a bit into the racist camp. Okay? And that should have been dealt with. That should have been dealt with by the Obama administration. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But that doesn't make you a racist because you disagree with a black president. I think it makes you kind of foolish if you're going to raise hell with your disagreement, but you can't tell me specifically what it is that you're angry about. I think that what happened with this administration in both terms, I think is real sad. I think it is very, very sad because I don't think it will be 100 years maybe before anyone can sit down and accurately judge, well, this President Obama was good because of A, B, and C, or he was bad because of A, B, and C, or he did not fulfill this A, B, or C. The reason I say that is because this administration has been under such attack, okay? He has probably been forced to do things that he didn't want to do because of the tremendous opposition to him just being there behind the big desk. So how can you accurately judge what this administration was about? I have never seen in my lifetime, I have never seen a situation where the heads of both the House and the Senate sit down and decide, look, no matter what this guy does, we're against it. Because I was getting ready to say a democracy. Well, we're not truly a democracy. We're like a republic, okay? But it's basically, the same democratic ideal, what have you. But let me put it this way. You cannot have a functioning, self-governing country if the people who you ran against and who you won the election from, if they're not going to, I don't want to, I'm not so much cooperate, but if they're not going to fulfill their function, then that makes it almost impossible for the chief executive to get anything done. And that has been the biggest problem with this administration. And it's sad because, and this is what really angers me about today's Republican Party. And when I tear into the Republican Party in this country, it hurts me to do that because my parents were Republicans. They were good, decent, New York black Republicans. But that was from another party, apparently from another time, 50s and 60s. And what that party has come to stand for nowadays, it is something totally different. And that is sad. Remember, it's the Republican Party. It was Eisenhower, President Dwight Eisenhower, the leader of the Allied armies in World War II in Europe, and who went on to become president. It was him that's responsible for our modern infrastructure, for the space program, for all of that. It was that guy. It was that party. And to see that party degenerate into what we have now, which is basically in a certain section of the country, the Republican Party is just as good as an Aryan nationalist party nowadays. That's what has happened to the to the Republican Party. And quite frankly, it's a tragedy. It truly is. A party that produced decent, honorable men, Jack Kemp, Everett Dirksen, and yeah, I'll say it, Bob Dole, and again, Eisenhower. Folks like that. Look what we have now in the Republican Party. A Trump, a Cruz, a Rubio. It's disgraceful what that party has become. And let me broaden that point somewhat. Now, I was in the military. I think a lot of people out there who know me know that. I spent 5 years during my time in the Navy at the Pentagon and at the White House. I was an intelligence technician with the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. So when I say this with some knowledge of what I speak. We have America, and this has nothing to do with whether I support this war or that. I'm just laying out the facts. We have the most powerful military in recorded history of this planet. No nation, no group of nations has ever been as strong, as technologically advanced in the knowledge of warfare as the United States of America. I mean, we're it. There is no one that surpasses us now, or quite frankly, 20, 30 years from now. I mean, we're it. We have surpassed historical names. Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan. We're past all of that. Our power is, omnipotent. The greatest power in the history of the planet, in recorded history. I say again, the greatest military power in the history of the planet. Now, why would you want to give an organization like that, such as that, why would you want to give that to a fellow like Donald Trump? Think about it. You want to give the strongest, greatest military machine ever created on the planet, and you want to give it to a person of the caliber of Donald Trump. Let that sink in, okay? Let that sink in for a bit. And see, this is why when I hear people talk about, oh, well, I really don't have time for politics. I'm really not into politics. So, in other words, you're saying, you're telling me, by saying that, you're telling me that the idea of Donald Trump being in control, because when you're president of the United States, that's it. You're the commander-in-chief. Now, there are some constitutional safeguards, okay? But generally speaking, overall, that's it. And this whole thing about, well, yeah, only Congress can declare war. Well, Congress hasn't declared war since December, was it 9th, 1941? Because as commander-in-chief of the armed forces, you can move your forces anywhere you want to. So you can start a war without the help of Congress, is what I'm saying. So essentially, that's it. And when you say to me or to anybody, oh, well, I'm just not into politics, you're telling the person that you're speaking with, you're telling the world that the thought of Donald Trump being in charge of the strongest military, I say it for what? This is about number 5, because I want this to sink in. The strongest military in the history of the planet. And you're telling us that you don't care if this guy, Donald Trump, is in charge, has control of the strongest, greatest military in the history of the world. And that he will also be able to appoint possibly as many as 3 Supreme Court justices. And again, I ask, and you're saying that you don't care about politics. I would say to anyone that feels that way, that, oh, well, politics really doesn't make that much of a difference to me. I really don't care. Okay. Take about 10 minutes and just sit down for about 10 minutes and just think, visualize Donald Trump having the nuclear launch codes. Understand this. He will be the one in charge. His powers, see, I don't think that people understand. The President of the United States, the powers that they have, they're almost godlike. Well, I hear, okay, well, it's the corporations that really run things and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, there is a lot of big money influence. Right. I get that. But ultimately, legally, the President of the United States is the one with the power, is the one who is in charge. And if you put Donald Trump in there, you're creating someone who will have, for all practical intents and purposes, godlike powers. Not just over the United States, but over the entire planet. And you have to understand that. You have to realize that. You have to understand that this country is at a very crucial phase. And I know that, you're probably thinking, oh, God, every election, these people are always coming out saying that this election is always the most important election. in my lifetime. I'm always hearing this. I know what a lot of you out there are thinking. Well, guess what? This time around, yeah, this is probably the most important election of your lifetime. And probably the most dangerous time in your lifetime. As a black American, as someone who's a veteran, and I say that in the sense that I've seen a very large portion of the world, and I have seen that large portion of the world relating to the fact of America and her influence in that world that I have seen. And that's why I say this to people of color, Caucasian. I say this to all. As we go into this new year, you simply have to determine within yourself that you are going to be involved. You have to, for the sake of everything that you hold dear. You have to. Because as I said before, our country is in a crucial state. I myself, okay, I was a kid for the civil rights movement. But I know it well. I remember it well because I grew up in a political family. So you could not help but constantly be exposed to the political and social struggles that this country was going through. But I felt as an individual, with all that was happening, with the assassinations and what have you, I felt more inclusive. I felt more a part of the United States then than I do now. Oh yes, I most certainly do. I look and I see, I jotted some things down. In Flint, Michigan, now, the last time I checked the map of the United States, Michigan is in the United States. Last time I checked the map, we have a situation where the governor, and yeah, happens to be a Republican governor, this guy, and I believe, state water commissioner, or what have you, they came up with the brilliant idea that, I'm not going to try and get us all lost in the technical terminology. Let's suffice it to say that the way that they have been handling the process of making the water clean for Flint, Michigan, that's the city there, the way that they have made that water clean, for some reason, economic, from what I understand, they felt they could come off cheaper by changing the way in which they purified the water. And they acted upon that idea. Now, there was a doctor there. I don't know if she is with the city of Flint or she's with an organization located there in Flint, because you know that there are parts of Michigan that economically are very bad off, okay? And she might have been with one of those nonprofit organizations that try to help people in areas such as that. But whoever she was working with, she began to notify the state that, hey, we have a problem here. This water is not correct. And in testing this water, we find abnormally high amounts of lead in it. And we all know, those of us who are parents, we know about the dangers, especially those of us that live in urban America, the dangers of kids being, babies being exposed to lead. And the governor and his water commissioner basically told this young lady doctor to take a hike. They did commercials telling people, look, everything is fine, you don't have to worry. Come to find out several weeks later that, yeah, you do have reason to worry. And at last count, they had found 200 definite cases of children with lead in their bloodstream. And I think, what was it, another potential close 1,000? It's a horrendous situation, I'll put it that way. And the guy who was advising the governor, he's been fired. And quite frankly, I think that him getting fired as this situation is starting to really come to light, I think that that's a get-over for him. I'm pretty sure that he took his little parachute, his little compensation, and got the hell out of Michigan, quite frankly. Because at this point, when I say they, the groups, nonprofit groups that have gotten involved in this terrible situation, they are trying to indict the governor. And to me, that sounds like a distinct possibility. Now, Flint is a city, kind of a city that you find in the Midwest, throughout the Midwest. It's not as big as New York, but it's large enough to be classified as a city. And oddly enough, because you see this a lot in the Midwest, you have a city that is black and white, but they're all primarily low income. So for somebody that wants to say, okay, they're trying to poison out black people, well, no, it's not just, they're gonna poison black folks. No, this is a thing which, if anything, seems more like this is an attempt to cut down on the money that we spend on low-income people. And that's the important thing to keep in mind. A lot of us get hung up in this race thing, and we should. But that's the type of thing that's being done by certain powers that be to keep us at each other's throats. You look at Flint, Michigan, you see a place that's low income, and it should make all of us stop and wonder, what kind of what has our country come to? What has our nation come to? For the sake of a few pennies, we are going to allow our people, Americans, our people, we're going to allow a situation where our babies are being poisoned. Now, as I said, the Republicans, they seem to have gotten control of the state government there in Michigan. The governor's house, I think they are the majority in the legislature. But unfortunately, see, that's what has become indicative of this struggle. And yeah, as Bernie Sanders would say, yeah, we have a class war going on, and we shouldn't be ashamed or afraid to talk about it, because we're on the losing end. Okay, the middle class, they are totally losing the war. And as we begin this year, this is what we need to keep in mind. Now, for the rest of the year, the Concerned Forum will be talking about issues just like what we've mentioned here today. And I want you all to know that we're going to keep fighting. And we hope that we can get you to fight along with us. Once again, Happy New Year. God bless. And let's continue the struggle. Thank you.